Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Legislative Advocacy webinar tonight for Extension Board members and unit leaders across the state. My name is Dave Varner, Associate Director with Nebraska Extension, and with me I have Michelle Waite, a UNL Assistant to the Chancellor for Government and Military Relations, and Jessie Brophy, Director of External Engagement for IANR. Of course, the purpose of this webinar is to prepare everyone for the NACEB Legislative Day next Wednesday, February 5th. So we're so happy that you're here live or watching this recording at some point before February 5th to get a sense of what's going on in the unicameral and for some tips and tricks on how to best engage and connect with your respective state senators. So we have a brief presentation that we're going to share with you this evening and some comments and suggestions for you. And while we're doing that, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to type those in the chat box. We'll be monitoring the chat and responding to those questions from time to time throughout the evening. And then at the very end, we'll have some time for Q&A as well.
Perfect.
So with that, Michelle, would you like to start for us?
You bet. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, everybody, for being with us this evening. We really appreciate it. Jessie and I started the day off awfully early this morning at an egg breakfast. And so we just appreciate you taking the time this evening on such an important topic. And hopefully this will help you prepare for next week when you're at the Capitol. Many of you, hopefully this isn't too repetitive. Some of this will be similar to what maybe you've heard before. We've tried to change it up just a little bit, customize it a little bit for this evening's presentation, as well as your visit next week. I know many of you, I've been with the Chancellor's office. I'm in my 23rd year now. Prior to this time, I worked over in the Capitol for about 12 years. Had the pleasure of working for Ron Rakes and Ron Witham. So while some of it's certainly much more advanced as far as technology over there, a lot of the process is still the same. So anyway, we're hoping both Jessie and I can give you some good tips this evening to help you out next week. Jessie?
Nice. You want to forward this slide?
I will.
Awesome.
Maybe.
Here we go. We'll do it this way first.
Okay.
No, it's just
Awesome. So the things that we're going to cover tonight, we're going to talk about why it's so important for you to advocate, what we are advocating for, to whom we advocate, where we spend our time advocating, what the best times of year to do this, and then how can you be the most effective at your advocacy efforts? Now, what can you do that can make you the most effective possible and use your resources to the best of your abilities. So those are the things we're going to cover tonight.
Oh, Dave, you're going to have to do the clicker, I think. Maybe it's not moving. So a lot of this slide may seem obvious to everybody this evening, especially working so closely with Extension, but you would be surprised. The university's role throughout the state is not always so obvious. Obviously, University of Nebraska-Lincoln has actually a role in every one of these capacities, as well as our sister institutions. As the flagship Research One, we have an impact locally, nationally, and internationally, and we try to remind our elected officials of that.
To kind of get an idea of our advocacy efforts, I think it's also important to understand how our leadership looks at the university. And I hope that, again, this is probably repetitive for some of you, but others may not know if you're new to this. But at the University of Nebraska, we are a system. So we have 4 different universities within that umbrella, within that system. We're kind of different from many other universities in this way, where we actually have a president that oversees the 4 different universities. And then chancellors. I think some universities it's backwards, where the chancellor is the head honcho and the president of each university. But we actually have 4 campuses, 3 chancellors that oversee those 4 campuses. Chancellor Doug Christensen at UNK, Ronnie Green at UNL, and Chancellor Jeff Gold, who oversees both UNMC and UNO in Omaha. I also want to mention this time about Vice President Mike Bain's role. Many of you might have met him in the past. He's in kind of a unique position. At the university here, we have the system, and then we have the 4 campuses, and then of course we have the colleges and the departments. But what is the Institute of Ag and Natural Resources? Like, where does that fit into that hierarchical or that structure? And we're kind of, again, Nebraska is unique in this way. I think there's only 2 universities in the country that have this kind of a system where they have an Institute of Ag and Natural Resources. And Mike's position, he actually has 2 titles. He's the Vice Chancellor for the Institute, and then he's also the Vice President for Agriculture, to where he reports to the President. So he reports to Ronnie Green as the Vice Chancellor of the Institute, and then the Vice President role, he reports to the President of the university system. So that's kind of a unique unique thing about the university.
So, and then even above President Carter, if you can envision the boxes of the Board of Regents. So that sort of gives you an idea of our organizational chart. And I can't overstate the importance that Mike actually plays with the chancellors. The President's Council, which is made up of the chancellors and the vice presidents, make, frankly, most of the major decisions within the university system. Oops, sorry. I don't know how to use a clicker. Okay. So in any given year, the university is likely to be advocating for improving our ability to execute our missions of teaching, research, and service. Increases in state funding, increases in one-time state funding for capital construction projects, increases in funding for research. This year, one of the Lincoln campus's priorities will be funding that we'll talk about a little bit later for the Doherty Water for Food Institute. Decreasing regulatory burdens on university operations. This is rare, but there on occasion are outdated statutes, mainly for business functions, but on occasions there's outdated statutes that need to be adjusted. But as you know, we're all here because of our students. So our final goal is improving our experiences for all of our students. Yes.
So kind of an overview of the Nebraska Legislature. Who do we advocate to? Of course, there's the state senators, and I'm sure in many cases you probably know your senator better than I know mine. Being your neighbors and your friends and the people you go to church with and stuff. But there's also then the legislative staff, and don't underestimate the importance of the legislative staff. Michelle being one of them, past staffer. I've learned a lot about their role and the importance they play in that office. There's also the Legislative Fiscal Office, which is a very important role. And then also we work closely with the governor's office too. And then within the governor's office, of course, some of the different executive committees in that office. So the Department of Ag, the Department of Education, thank you, other departments.
So this is a more comprehensive list of either committees or individuals that Jessie just referred to. State senator, as far as the state senators, frankly, especially this time of year, the Appropriations Committee is probably your most powerful, most important committee. They're by far the budget writing committee. Then I would say it would be the Education Committee. I've mentioned before, our Education Committee primarily deals with K through 12 education, which I frankly think is sort of a mixed blessing. On occasion, there are higher education issues that go before that committee, but we don't often go in front of that committee. There are 11 standing committees. So there are 11 legislative committee chairs, all influential, all elected by their peers. The dean of the legislature is always the speaker of the legislature. They set the schedule. I can tell you, for working for a former speaker, that is, I can't even explain to you how important it is in the order and how that schedule is set. And then Jessie alluded to legislative staff. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but they're incredibly influential with the senators that they work for. The senators deal with so many different issues every year that legislative staff are becoming increasingly more, and especially with term limits, increasingly more important. From the governor's perspective, we've got the governor's chief of staff, as well as the DAS, Department of Administrative Services Budget Director. Again, one of those quiet, behind the scenes offices that's incredibly important. And then the equivalent of that on the legislative side is the Legislative Fiscal Office, We have one legislative analyst that is assigned to the university. They are sort of, in a way, a devil's advocate. They don't advocate necessarily on our behalf, but they really help us improve ourselves. We all kind of get in our little tunnels and don't think about the bigger picture sometimes, and they're very good about sort of keeping us on task and helping us with those financial requests. So this next slide is essentially members of the Appropriations Committee. This committee is unique because it's the only committee within the unicameral that is elected by caucus, meaning there are 3 or 4 caucuses. I think it's 3. I'd have to look back at the rules, but there's a wide distribution. If you look at these names, if you know any of these names, they represent the entire state, which is incredibly important. You wouldn't want, frankly, all rural senators on that committee because a lot of the financial fiscal decisions might be made on behalf of rural Nebraska, to be really honest. And same with the metro area. So this gives a nice overview, disbursement of committee members across the state. You'll see the committee chair, Senator Stinner's from Scottsbluff and Kate Bowles is from Lincoln. I don't necessarily know that that's a requirement, a rural and urban type of chair and vice chair, but in this case, this is how it is this time. Most of these committee members are pretty supportive of the university. I like to say with the exception of about 1.5. So, but we're pretty fortunate actually with this committee.
So we are in the middle of the second session of the 106th legislature this year. Legislative session begins on the second Wednesday after the first Monday. Is that right?
First Wednesday.
The first Wednesday after
first Monday of the year. Yeah.
That's when it starts. We alternate 60-day sessions and 90-day sessions. The 90-day sessions is when the budget is decided on, so it's a longer session because it's a budgetary year. The 60-day sessions are shorter, but it feels like they do just as much work. What I have found out in the past couple weeks is that there's just as much going on in just a much shorter amount of time. Anything I missed on that? However, even though the session's only going on either 60 or 90 days, really our engagement efforts go on year round. I was surprised with how busy this past summer was, particularly in the area of the interim studies. So this is a time when we might be asking people for to increase their engagement efforts when senators are out there looking at talking to communities, talking to researchers, trying to decide, what they're going to focus on for the next legislative session. I know there's one who's focusing on flood, a couple that are focusing on flood mitigation relief. And so I know that Bostelman, who's actually in the picture there, talking with one of our researchers, Julie Peterson, out in the West Central, that he went around the state talking to communities, especially those who were impacted with the flood. So really our legislative engagement goes on year round, even when the session isn't going on.
Yeah, and the key there also is that senators work 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. They literally will get calls from their constituents 24 hours a day, and they make a whopping $1,000 gross a month. So these are just incredibly dedicated public servants that either have a very understanding employer or some of them have some wealth.
Does this mail sound awesome? So this kind of gives you an example of some of the ways that we do engage with our senators and our legislative candidates. Right now, it's also an election year. So we've been also engaging not only with the senators, but with the potential, with the candidates who are running next year, or running for the November election, setting up campus tours, meeting with them. We do a lot of community engagement events. I think some of you online have helped me set up those before for Vice Chancellor Boehm. The President and the Chancellor also goes out into the communities visiting with senators, private lunches and dinners. We often try to get senators to come to our athletic activities, whether it's hockey or football or basketball. The University Research Summits are a really great way to engage with senators, specifically when the senator is focus has a specific area of interest that they're focused on. I'll go back to Bostelman's interest in the flood mitigation. There's 3 senators right now in Omaha are focused on food insecurity and solving that issue. So, the Regional Food Summit is coming up in Omaha soon. That might be a good engagement opportunity for those senators. We also host them at the holiday parties. You guys, like UNL downtown, this downtown campus has been doing some advocacy presentations geared towards students, and they brought in senators to talk about topics like civil discourse. Civil discourse has been the big one that they've been focused on this year. So those are just a few different ways that we engage with the senators year round. We should probably add the NACEB legislative day to that great list, because that's a big thing that we do each year.
So we have incredibly ramped up our, if you can't tell by this list, and this was consistent even last year, we've partly because of term limits, but we've just ramped up our engagements with senators dramatically over this last couple of years, which I think has been really helpful. It's all about building relationships. We haven't mentioned that yet, but it's all about building relationships and showing appreciation for what they do. So when is the best time to advocate? These are some key dates that we've put on the slide here. Timing around legislative activity, legislative discussion is key. The first day was January 8th. It was the latest, I think, session can start. I think someone mentioned to me one day which was sort of nice for us. We had a long, nice holiday break before session started. The president always hosts the legislative dinner, and this year it was January 21st. We had 40 senators RSVP for that dinner, and that was just a terrific turnout. There are 10 days for bill introductions, 10 legislative days. So the last day for bill introduction, which is really sort of the first major process in the legislative session, was January 23rd. The Nebraska Economic Forecasting Board in 60-day sessions meets 3 times a year, and in 90-day sessions meet 4 times a year. But they too are an incredibly important behind-the-scenes board of lay people that have an expertise in revenue forecasting. The governor appoints most of them, and the executive board, I believe, appoints a few as well. But essentially what they do is provide revenue projections and forecast that both the governor's office, as well as the executive branch, as well as the legislative branch use when they write our budget or write the state's budget. So they're just incredibly important. And so timing when some of the appropriations committee hearings happen, the budget hearings, when the budget is actually advanced from committee, quite often centers around the forecasting board dates. Full floor debate begins this year on March 3rd. And then once again this year, I think it'll be the 3rd year, Jessie, of I Love Advocacy Day. I Love NU Advocacy Day. It's been incredibly effective. I can tell you the first year, it was 3 years ago, when we were looking at some serious budget cuts. It literally turned the tide with some of these senators. We had, I don't remember the estimate, I'll bet you we had 200 people down there easily that pulled their senators out. And this is different from the NACEB day, but they pulled their senators out of the legislative floor and talked to their senators about how important the university was to them, how personal it was to them, as well as to the state. And that really turned the tide. And then the last date is April 22nd. You'll see the term referred to as sine die. That's Latin, but essentially that means the last day of the legislative session. That can change. Last year, for the first time in a long time, I don't recall how many days they have to meet, but they actually got done early last year. They didn't go the full 90 days last year. So this is probably one of the most important slides. If you take anything away from tonight's presentation, this is essentially how to deal with senators and their staff and what seems to be most effective. I think I mentioned to you before, it's been a while since I've been there as a staffer, but I can tell you that these bits of advice, how you maneuver the process is still relevant today. So once again, it's all about building relationships. If you don't know your senator, don't hesitate to contact them. The one thing about our unicameral, and I don't remember the quote on the side of the building, I should know this, but that talks about the citizens legislature, and it's truly true. I mean, they are very approachable individuals. You may know all your senators, you know, they're like your mom and your dad or your brother or your sister, very easy to approach. Become active in your community, and it's always kind of nice to know what your senators are involved in. It gives you a personal connection with those senators, and you may even be involved in some of those organizations. When you make contact with your senator or committee members, they're one and the same actually. Email, phone, whether it's a letter, face-to-face visit. You know, a few key things that still resonate is be brief and relevant. We talk about if you write a letter or provide some type of handout, you know, the first paragraph should be why you're writing. Then you give an example of a personal connection with the university, how much you support the university, and then the last paragraph should be what you're requesting. Keep it concise. As you can imagine, even in today's electronic age, they get reams and reams of paper. And so giving them a lot of data and graphs, it's not that they don't appreciate it, they just honestly don't have time to digest it. Always be honest. If you don't know, clarify the issue and follow up. Now, I think most people are honest when they communicate with the senator, but if you don't know an answer, it's perfectly fine to say, Senator, I don't know, I will get back to you. That's frankly the best course, because it's a small world down there and they talk. So that's the best course of action. Visit with staff if the senator is not available. Staff work just incredibly hard. They are very, very influential. And I can tell you that if for some reason you feel like speaking to staff is beneath you and you convey that somehow, staff remember that. And you may not always get an audience with the senator the next time around. Or the senator might call you and say, or call their staff and say, you know, I haven't heard anything on this from any of my constituents. What are you hearing? Just trust me on this. Staff are very influential with their senators, and just always be respectful. Not only senators, but their staff work incredibly hard on behalf of all of us in the state. The other thing I might mention is no form letters. Make each of your contacts unique and personal to you. And when I say form letters, I mean if you are affiliated with an organization that gives you a pre-printed letter and all you have to do is sign it, don't do it. Or at least don't send it to your senator, because it'll get ignored. It's not personal. The other thing I might mention is you don't have to tell a senator that you're not, if you disagree with a senator, be respectful, but agree to disagree. Make sure to tell them you're a constituent. Frankly, that tells them you're a voter. You don't have to tell them that you're not going to vote for them, no matter how frustrated you may be. But it does say something to them if you just inform them that you're a constituent. That's the first thing I used to do because I did a lot of bill drafting and constituent casework. And I'd say, what is your address? And I'd know instantly if they were in the district. And so that makes a big difference. So use your story to show senators why their support is so critical for the university. Personalize your story. You know, if you had children that went through the university, if you had an experience through extension, maybe how you're involved with extension now, what made you committed and to want to volunteer either on the board or in the capacity of employment. They want to hear that type of stuff. And finally, an obvious one is just asking for their support for the university.
If I could just reinforce a couple of your points, Michelle. So getting to know your senator and that relationship is so critical. So if you are a new extension board member or a new unit leader, you know, one of the things I would encourage you to do is set a goal to be able to recognize your senator or senators and know them on a first name basis. Be around them enough, visit with them enough so they recognize you. so they're comfortable contacting you too, right?
Oh, they do. That's a really good point, because if they have you as a contact, sort of like you, I mean, if you're new to a community or and you need a repair person, you ask for a reference, and if you like their service, you're going to call them back. And the senator will do the same thing. If you have a relationship with a senator and they know you may have an expertise in a certain area, they will call you. I mean, they won't hesitate to call you. That's a really good point.
Yeah, and you're, one of those challenges we have on a continuing basis is not every state senator realizes that Nebraska Extension is a part of the University of Nebraska.
That's right.
So just reiterating that in conversation would be great too. And I love the story comment, Michelle, because we have lots of stories to tell.
Yes.
And a lot of folks who serve on extension boards are very passionate about extension. That's why they serve. And so thinking about what that impactful, memorable story is, because I'm not sure how many hundreds of conversations a senator has in the course of a year, but really have to think about what they're going to remember, right? In the course of all those conversations, or what you can write that they'll resonate with them, that they'll remember, maybe retell the story later.
Yes, exactly. I'll start with this one, Jess.
Sure. So, so we do have some, some guidelines that the president's office is sort of set up for, guidelines of advocacy and how we talk about advocacy to other university employees, other faculty members and administrators. You are a little bit different since you are an external organization. However, the similarity is you're still representing the university. And so even though you're outside of the umbrella of the university, you're still there representing the university as a whole. So one thing that the president's office, appreciates is kind of this no surprise mentality, where if there's something that you think that we need to know about, something that you think that is an issue. I know that last year it came up. One of the NACEB board members came to me and told me a story that they had, conversation they had with one of the senators. So just that communication is just so critical. Keep us informed of those conversations, the good, the bad, the neutral. That would be great.
I would also say, Jessie and I are here at your service as well. Use us as a resource. This is all about communication. Again, part of what we've tried to do the last couple of years, not only just ramping up our relationship building with senators, we're trying to just to get a better handle on our faculty and staff primarily, but as well as some of our constituency groups like NACEB, and how we can work a little bit closer together. But communication is crucial. Even if you're a board member and you hear a senator say something in your community and you think it's important for us to know, let us know. I've been in contact with several different extension educators on invitations to events. We try to help you with that and help coordinate that. Keep in mind, there are other invitations by other campuses that are also going on with some of these senators. Everybody wants an audience, which is a good thing, but we just try to kind of coordinate that so that it's not only the best event for you, but so that you get a good turnout of senators.
That's right.
Jessie mentioned representing the university. Your role is really sort of informing and educating, as well as giving senators an idea of how crucial extension is to the educational system in the state, to the university. The one thing I would say is, if you are there representing the university, we would just respectfully ask that you remember that. We know, you'll see a slide a little bit later, we know that we all have personal opinions on issues. I like to say I have 10 letters to the editor in my head, but I don't print them because I'm there representing the university and they know that. But we would just ask that you remember that in that context when you're with NACEB or representing the university. The couple other things, especially on the employee side, is be mindful of public announcements. This doesn't happen often, but I would tell you that sometimes when we are not communicating and something is mentioned publicly, timing can be everything if the legislature's in session and it strikes a wrong chord. Or Or if it's a conversation we should have had ahead of time with the senator. You know, if there's something, a message we need to deliver to a senator about his or her district ahead of time, we try to do that. And they appreciate that, even if it's a negative message. That make sense?
Are we on time?
We're doing fine.
Are we okay?
We're okay. So, okay, good.
Anything else on that? Jess? Okay.
Okay, awesome. So back to the I Love NU Day, talking a little bit about that. You guys are all welcome to come. It is March 12th at the Capitol in the
10th.
afternoon. 10th or the 12th? It's the
going.
10th.
Keep
It's
going.
the 10th.
I'll
It's
double
March
check.
10th at the Capitol. Pardon me. March 10th at the Capitol
Yeah,
in the
okay.
afternoon.
It's a 10th.
We would love to have a big showing there. So each year we host that day. We like to also see a lot of students. So if you want to grab some of your local students to join us there, some of you know, if they're back home for something, that would be great. It's just usually a really fun day. We have Senator Stenner, who's going to be hosting us that day. I think we have a couple senators lined up to talk. The chancellor is going to be there. I think the vice chancellor is going to be there. I'm not sure about the president or not.
I'm not sure if you're in or not.
But yeah, it should be a good day. So we hope to see you all at that event. Very similar to actually to the way the NACEB Legislative Day works is we just kind of storm the Capitol. We have a few people speak to us at the beginning of the day, and then we just kind of hang out in the rotunda, pull senators from the floor, let students really engage with them, especially if they've been their senators for the first time. That's kind of a big deal. But it's a lot of fun.
So if you were at the NACEB event last year, you might recognize the balcony across the way.
That's right.
So the NACEB group almost filled that balcony last year, and the organization was recognized by Senator Stenner on the floor. And so all the senators knew that NACEB was there. So of course that's our goal again this year, is to fill the balcony and have that same recognition and impact as we had last year.
That's right. And then be sure to wear red.
Okay, point. I might also say, if you look at the picture on the left with some of our students from campus, senators love students. And, you know, I don't know how you engage, or if this is like an opportunity for a 4-H outing or something like that, or but they absolutely love students. They're used to seeing Jessie and I down there. They get bored with Jessie and I, but they absolutely love students, and frankly, their constituents. So here's a slide a little bit on social media. We thought it might be helpful just to give you a few guidelines here. Some of you are active participants on social media, others are not, which is fine. I would tell you that senators do like to be followed, and especially as more and more younger senators, you would be amazed at how many of them are on social media. If you are doing things in your areas that you think the senator should know about, or the state or the UNICAM, tweet it and use the hashtag NU4NE. That goes to the University of Nebraska system. They're really, really good about responding and retweeting it. Jessie Brophy is extremely good about tweeting. So is Ronnie Green. Michelle is okay on occasion, but if I see it, I will retweet it. And you would be amazed at how many people see that. And that just, frankly, helps spread our message. I would suggest, you know, use your social posts to tell personal stories about the university. Share university media content. If you get in a discussion, you know, we have had on occasion faculty or staff that may disagree with the senator. We never, ever want to inhibit conversation. But I would tell you that I just remind, especially some of the administrators, just remember your role. You're known in your community. I would just be mindful of what you say, and don't argue. It's frankly not worth it. Correct inaccuracies, I think that's certainly fair, but I wouldn't necessarily argue with people. I think that's it. Jessie, can you think of anything else on social media?
No, I think we're good.
Yeah. So NACEB now has a Twitter handle and a Facebook site. So it's just UNL NACEB.
Is it?
So please think about tagging and populating those sites as well next week.
Yeah.
And year round, really.
Yeah. I would tell you, Facebook is phasing out actually in the younger population.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of us older folks still use it on occasion, but Facebook is really phasing out. I mean, Twitter really is sort of the, I think. In fact, my Twitter account, I just use for work. I don't even use it for anything personal. So just kind of food for thought there.
That's true.
Yep. So if you haven't already, I would encourage everybody to go out and join the NU Advocates, to become an NU advocate. And what you need to do is you need to go to
NU Advocates /
here. We'll share
American.
the URL with you in just a minute here. But just go out to the university's website. You just have to fill in your contact information. What that'll do is that'll just get you on an email list that you will hear all of the information firsthand as it comes out. You'll hear it, at the same time that Michelle and I are hearing about this in some regards. During the legislative session, they sent out weekly emails, and it just really helps raise your awareness about what's going on at the university, what's going on in higher education around the company, and things that you can do to help contribute to the mission of advocating for the university. So if you haven't already, I encourage everyone to go out and become an NU advocate. Here I can look up here.
Yeah,
Well, next slide. Well, choosing the next slide, I'll find out
Okay.
where we go here.
I should have probably had this slide a little bit earlier, but this will give you an idea. So when you come to the Capitol next week, I debated whether or not, what we have now is what we refer to as our sort of official legislative agenda. So frankly, when faculty and staff, we are a resource to state senators. We want to be a resource. That's the role of a land-grant institution. And so we quite often are responsive to senators and staff when they ask us for information about legislation, research. They're trying to come up with their own visions of public policy. But what we started to do within the last couple of years is formulate sort of an official legislative agenda. Because we know we have personal and professional interests in a variety of different areas. It also, frankly, sometimes keeps senators a little bit focused, I think, on what is the priority of the university, at least for that year. So what we did here is list all of our legislative agenda for the whole year this year. We put the 2 items in red that are UNL's priorities. The H3 scholarships is sort of a second variation of a bill that was drafted last year. This is the governor's bill. We're strongly supporting this bill. This is one of our top priorities. It essentially provides scholarship funding for the STEM fields, high skill, high demand, high wage. This is how it got its H3 nickname. And then the second priority for the Lincoln campus is funding for water research for the Doherty Water for Food Institute. We're going to be asking for $2.5 million to assist us in maintaining the institute and then taking it to that next level. Really, friends, those are the 2 areas when you talk to senators next week that you should focus on. I would say that there's a couple other issues up there that could be brought to your attention because they are very big issues for some of our sister campuses. And frankly, there's a lot of support within the university for them. But so I just wanted to make you aware of them in case senators mention them in a very positive way. 1084 in particular and 720. 1084 is what's referred to as the next project. This provides funding if a certain amount of federal investment is approved, as well as private investment. It will provide funding, excuse me, for a major UNMC research endeavor. But the complementary bill that has to be adjusted to also do that is LB 720. This gets a little confusing. 720 is the Nebraska Imagine Act. What that did prior to the next project coming in is some of our tax incentives for business, which is incredibly important to economic development throughout the state. It sunsets within the next year or 2. So 720 was envisioned as continuing or recreating it in a different form. But what happened, there is a tax incentive that has to be created for the 1084 project within 720. So these two actually complement each other. And you may hear about this because this has been a big topic of discussion, especially this last week. Most everything else is pretty self-explanatory. Pancreatic cancer research is research at the Med Center that was carried over from last year. Simulation in motion is another health-related endeavor that just had a hearing last week. And then on the very bottom, 1160, established the NSWERS program is really a database between the university, I think the state colleges, as well as Department of Economic Development.
There's a question.
Oh, yeah.
Which senator introduced?
1008.
1008 and 1026.
Yep, so 1026 is Senator Bowles, Kate Bowles here in Lincoln. She is the one that is going to run with the $2.5 million ask for the water for food. H3 scholarships was
Stinner.
Stinner?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, Senator
And he's
Stinner.
the chair of the Appropriations Committee.
Right,
That's a good
out
thing.
in, yep. So a rural senator, again, a rural senator and an urban senator, floating those bills.
So Michelle, a question about this. So these are initiatives this year, but we're in the second year of the biennium.
That's correct.
So the budget's been set for
Yes,
university.
that's right.
So perhaps just maybe a thank you or acknowledgement
Absolutely.
for continuing support
Yes.
for the university. would
Yes,
be
for the
how I
university's
feel.
budget, that would be great,
Okay.
yes. Or for the university in general.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
that'd be great. So typically, we touched on this a little bit earlier, the 60-day session typically isn't our major budget request, but obviously all of these have some type of a financial contribution here. The one thing about this year is there is extra money in the kitty, so to speak. And so we're not the only ones that are asking for some financial requests. Every one of these has some type of a financial request attached to it. 1026 had an interim study this last fall that Chancellor Green spoke at, as well as Peter McCormick from the Doherty Water for Food Institute. So they will once again appear before the Appropriations Committee. That hearing is scheduled on the 12th of February, along with the H3 scholarships, I think is the same day. So that'll be in 2 weeks. Next week, sort of the lay of the land is 1084 has a major hearing on Thursday. Again, we won't be there from the Lincoln campus perspective, but that hearing is on Thursday. Another bill of interest, but that it's not on the legislative agenda. We will get asked to testify on other issues. Sometimes we take a stand on it, and sometimes we don't, or we testify in a neutral capacity, just providing information. But I'm sure you've heard of the name, image, and likeness concept, or pay for play with student athletes. We will be taking a neutral position on that Monday. That'll be a major hearing for us. We'll have some of our friends from the athletic department testifying. And we want to be there, frankly, in support of our student athletes, because I think this is an issue that's come and that we're just all going to have to deal with it. We just hope we don't have 50 different laws and that the federal government will handle it within the next couple of years. I'm trying to think what else. Chancellor Green and I will be over at the Capitol a lot next week, talking to all the members of the Appropriations Committee on funding for the Doherty Water for Food Institute. Jess, can you think of anything else?
No,
That is it.
questions.
And while you're thinking about some questions, some things that will be in the packet for your senator. One will be the county impact reports. So in your individual counties, you can download those, or your unit leader can direct you to our website where you can download the county impact report for 2019. That's just typically 3 big ideas, 3 significant programs or impacts that happen in your local county. Those will all be in a packet for your senators, so you might want to be familiar with those. I'd also remember what 2019 was about with the disaster, the floods, the blizzard, the canal collapse. And Nebraska Extension was very involved in all of those endeavors, and those continue. So I think that would be part of the conversation.
I
budget
think
this
it
year too, right?
definitely should be. That as well as the impact reports. They love that type of information. They love their district information, even if it's how many fourth graders came to Morrill Hall.
Mhm.
And we don't have that necessarily, but they love that type of stuff.
Okay, great. Great. You know, the economy was tough in rural Nebraska before the blizzard and the flood and all this happened. And so one of the things you just might just assure and remind senators of is that Nebraska Extension, the university is their side, really.
Mhm.
We're out there living in communities, understanding the issues, living with them, and there to assist and help solve those issues as we move forward. Couple questions here. So where would we find some Cliff Note versions of 1008 and 1026 so we could educate ourselves on those bills?
So I actually have some background on the bill that was introduced last year, the precursor to 1008 that I think could be helpful. I can send you if you want to pass on.
Sure.
As well as I can probably at this point, I may even be able to find the statement of intent if it's done yet, which is a document that the introducing senator provides the committee ahead of time. It's just a brief description. And then 1026, oh, we've got all kinds of stuff on that. I'm trying to think what would be the easiest. What I could do is send you, it's public information, Chancellor Green's testimony from the fall.
Oh, that's interesting.
If you want something that long, but it's not Cliff's Notes. So I need to think about that a little bit, but we're happy to provide you with something on that.
You just want to share that with me? I can distribute that to our NACEB directors and our unit leaders.
Yep, sure will.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, it's a really good question.
Are great because reading through some of these bills is pretty torturous. I have to be honest.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
Jane's asking if packets for senators can be picked up ahead of time, and yeah, Jane, we will have packets for our urban counties, so Lancaster, Douglas, Sarpy. I think those will be available Monday morning. Double check with Linda Temple, but we are trying to get those ready because we realize that when you have multiple senators, you have to spread these visits over more than one day. So, and you've done a great job of lining those up. So thank you. We are also in the packet. There'll be some economic impact data, number of students, number of alumni, that type of information from the NU system. We'll have just a synopsis of Extension's work in flood response and recovery last year. Well, there'll be a number of things in that packet that will be for the senator.
A picture of their senator.
What's that?
A picture of their senator.
Are we gonna try to get a picture?
Yeah.
Oh,
Are you
absolutely.
gonna do that? Okay,
yeah,
good.
absolutely.
That way they.
Yes.
We'll be there as well to help you. So don't hesitate to ask questions. You know, if they ask you a question that kind of sort of trips you up, or if they try to, you know, if there's somebody that comes up that isn't very happy with the university, you know, how do you reframe that conversation? But I think you'll find the vast majority of them. I'd be real surprised if you have any pushback at all, frankly. We'll be supportive, we'll be appreciative that you're there. And like I said, they're just incredibly approachable and will be helpful to you, or will be just incredibly respectful and appreciative that you're there, especially if you've made the trip from somewhere.
Oh, absolutely. Question about, we're providing impact reports. Are there other items that we could prepare to provide for our personal visits with senators? And I'll just start that one off, but I think as Extension Board members, I'd be thinking about why you chose to be an Extension Board member, what your experience with Extension has been, why you advocate for Extension at the local level, and in this case at the state level. Think about what that story or those stories will be. You don't know how much time you're going to have, right? You might have a 30-minute meeting set up, but you may end up having 5 minutes. So think about, you have a list of things you want to talk about, what's the priority? Think about if you have a group that will be meeting with the senator. So orchestrate that so you know maybe who's going to do introductions, who's going to be the first one to visit, have a plan. That's usually one of the things that we're not ready for, right?
Right.
And one of the things I loved about last year is that when we did have meetings get postponed or canceled, our folks are great about going to Rotunda and having the senators pulled off the floor. And so that was really cool to see that persistence.
Yes.
And it went over really well.
Speaking of that, if we do pull them off the floor, which actually is kind of nice, that I like that kind of that impromptu. We never know who's going to be in the Rotunda or at the Capitol on the same day that we're there. And so I can tell you, we had another group, it was the I Love NU Advocacy Day, I think, last year.
Yes.
That came, there was another group that was there lobbying pretty hard on a certain issue, and senators that would have typically come out didn't come out to visit some of our university folks. And it was big supporters of the university, and it had nothing to do with not wanting to see us, but frankly, they didn't want to confront some of the members of that other organization. So don't, my motto of my story here is don't take it personally. We can figure out, you know, there could be lots of reasons why they're not coming out. They may be involved in discussion. They may be actually listening discussion. There's certain procedural issues that come up that they have to stay in there. Call of the House, it's called, where they have to stay in there. They can't come out. So we can help you kind of maneuver through all that.
And we can't plan around that. Right?
No,
It
you
just
never
happens.
can. Yeah, it's always impromptu.
Yeah, it just happens. So there's a chance also that there'll be topics lifted up by a senator that may be something we don't want to engage in discussion around, right?
Yeah.
And so if that happens, and one of them might be property taxes, right? We're not going to have an impact on property taxes and what extension does directly, right?
Right.
So what I would encourage you to do if that happens is turn that discussion to something going on locally. Just remind your senator that we'd love to spend our time talking about what we do locally as a university for you through extension, through 4-H and other ways, and talk about the positives and steer away from those other discussions that really won't be fruitful for us to engage in.
Right, right.
We're not sure if they will. They're sure they might. It's very tempting, as I mentioned earlier. You know, we all have personal opinions on things, and Lord knows the property tax issue is front and center. And frankly, I'm kind of optimistic about it this year. Not sure why, but I kind of think it could get resolved. So, but last year and the year before, you felt like a couple senators were sort of trying to box you in. And what they were doing, what you, NACEB, or some of our other organizations may not have realized, they were sort of pitting the bigger general funded agencies, AKA the university, against property tax, because there was a move to pull general fund money out of the big pie, and which would have affected all state agencies, not just the university. And so I personally think there was a lot of misunderstanding about that, not from our end, but from new senators, especially a couple of years ago. So it was almost like we were to blame for the property tax problem a couple of years ago. But that really has gotten much better.
Good. That's good to hear. Other questions? Well, for Extension Board members who are on tonight and will be watching this, thank you, first of all, for serving as volunteers, as Extension Board members, as advocates, as partners for the University of Nebraska, with the University of Nebraska. And when you are at the Capitol, I would just ask you to be courageous, to visit with your senator, to be the voice of your local extension program, and to tell your story, and to practice that before you arrive on the scene, so you're confident in what that message will be. And you will have, in almost all cases, a unit leader or someone with you that will be there to backstop you, to help you through that conversation if you need that. So, but I don't think you'll need that help. I think you'll do great.
Yeah, I think once you start, I think you'll be very comfortable. It's always that first time doing, you know, if you haven't talked to your senator before, but I think it'll be great. You'll be very well received.
There's a buzz in the Capitol when there's a bunch of people there, and all these conversations going on. It's like nothing else. So it's a lot of fun.
It is.
And to become a NU advocate, I found the URL. Just go. All you have to do is go to nebraska.edu, and then right there on the top, there's a NU advocates button. Just click on that, and you can sign up to become an advocate. So for future reference, nebraska.edu.
Thank you.
So yes, thank you.
I also want to acknowledge, should have done this up front, that Steve Stetner, president of NACEB, probably would have been sitting right here with us tonight, because he seems like he's everywhere as president of NACEB.
He is,
but he's serving in his capacity as president of the Merritt County Extension Board tonight, and their Extension Board has met tonight. So thanks, Steve, for your help from afar and for supporting NACEB throughout the year, and helping us all make February 5th a great day.
Absolutely great.
Looking forward to it.
All right, thanks everyone. This will be recorded, and we will release this recording tomorrow. Thank you all, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.